Hello and welcome again to Leon Builds Agents. Today we're going to be talking about three underrated models that are super powerful, that are significantly cheaper than more popular large LLMs like Claude Opus and ChatGPT, GPT-4, that are significantly faster and more powerful. And so we're going to start today in OpenRouter. If you have not been to OpenRouter.ai, it's an excellent platform that essentially has access to any open or closed source LLM. So if we go into OpenRouter, we can go to browse and we can see, what models they have to choose from. And there's, they're updating models essentially every day. But the models that we're going to be talking about today are, there's three of them. One is called Haiku, and this model is from a company called Anthropic. They make the Claude series of models, and Anthropic released their Claude 3 series of models fairly recently, and Haiku is the smallest, the cheapest, and the fastest of these. So Haiku is a super powerful model in comparison to previous generation models. Another model that we're going to be using is actually a fine tune done by Microsoft, and it's called the Wizard LM2 8x22B. Essentially, all that you need to know is this is kind of a medium-sized model. It's still fairly inexpensive. It has a large context window, and it has been fine-tuned by Microsoft AI. And then the last model is actually just a smaller version of the previous model we spoke about. So once again, it's a fine tune done by Microsoft. But what I want to show you today is, many people are using GPT-4 Turbo or Claude, and sometimes they're not satisfied with their responses. And what I want to show is that good conversations can actually, with the right models, can actually significantly outperform models that cost 10 or 20 or even more times more. So let's get into the platform. The reason that I'm here on these pages is if we go into the specific model page for each of our models, we take a look. Let's take a look at these costs. So for the Claude model, it's only 25 cents per million tokens of input and $1.25 output. Now, if we went in and actually searched for something like GPT-4 Turbo, it's in comparison $10 per million. So Claude Haiku, 25 cents per million input, GPT-4 Turbo, $10, right? And then $30 per million output tokens. So these models are going to be significantly cheaper. And if we go into the Wizard LM2, they're larger models. Once again, pretty comparable pricing. 65 cents input, 65 cents output. And once again, this is per million tokens. It's not easy to generate a million tokens when you're just going in a chat UI. And then lastly, the Wizard LM2 7B model. This is all the way down 7 pennies per million input and output. So the point is, if we can get anything quality out of these, anything close to the quality of GPT-4 or Claude, we're saving ourselves a lot of money. And the second reason I want to show you this, and this is why I like OpenRouter's interface so much, is they show you how many tokens per second you're getting. So once again, this Wizard LM2 7B model is getting over 100 tokens per second, pretty fast. The LM2 8x22B, the larger model, only 23, but this is still pretty fast. Some more expensive providers, you can actually choose which provider you want to route it to, but I typically just route it to the cheapest. And this has less latency than most, so it doesn't really matter. But then the Claude Haiku model gets almost 70 tokens per second on average. So if we once again go back and compare that to something like ChatGPT-4 Turbo, if we go in and look at GPT-4 Turbo, let's see, they're only getting 19 tokens per second. So essentially, the fastest version of a model like GPT-4 is orders of magnitude more expensive, and it's basically on par in tokens per second with the largest model that we're interacting with today. So once again, we're kind of setting the frame for, if we can get quality outputs out of this and out of these models, then we're going to be saving ourselves a significant amount of money. And what that ends up translating to is we can create more advanced agentic business use cases, because we don't want to just think about planning for one-off conversations. These models are nice in that they make these things inexpensive, but in comparison, we want to have many agentic conversations back and forth, many different uses back and forth, and having input output cost on the order of 25 cents, 5 cents, less than $1 per million tokens, in comparison to something like $10 to $30 on the GPT-4 front. That's obviously going to make a huge business use case difference, and it's going to allow us to unlock significantly more use cases. So I want to come in and show you, as I'm testing new models, here's what I end up doing. So I go into OpenRouter, and once again, another reason I love the platform is OpenRouter allows you to see how other people on the platform, what parameters they're using. Now, this is aggregated data. This is not personalized data, but you can see how the average person is using it and how the lowest kind of 10% at the bottom are people using it for each parameter, and then at the top, the right tail of the distribution. So you can see for each model how people are actually having to change from default parameters, right? So if we go into each of these models, we can learn really quickly, hey, are people just using the default parameters? So for example, on this Wizard LM2 8x22B model, we come in here and we see basically, people aren't really tinkering with the parameters. What does that tell us? It's probably generally a pretty powerful model. You probably don't have to do a lot of changes on the parameterization, right? So people are finding this to be a generally powerful model. In contrast, if we come into the 7B, which is significantly lower, we see a lot different distribution. We see people needing to take the temperature down to get high performance. We see some people having to take top K up to 50 to get high performance. People are clearly experimenting with the frequency, presence, and repetition penalties. So we can come in and quickly, before even actually writing any messages, and testing anything, we can get an insight on what parameters might work well to give us quality responses. So I came in here and I loaded up those three models. I have the Wizard 8x22B, I have the Claude Haiku, and then I have the 7B. And what I did is essentially I wanted to make this video. And so instead of coming in and doing a bunch of prompt engineering and thinking about, okay, I want to go from an idea to, an outline, to a screenplay, to a script, to all those things. I wanted to see, are these models actually generally performant? And so I took a very generic, general assistant prompt. This is my prompt, and I can put it in the description. You're my general purpose personal assistant. You have access to infinite knowledge, including the secrets of the universe. You're an exceptional instruction follower, and we have educational, insightful, and productive conversations. Utilize Markdown to format your response. That was the prompt that I used. And so this prompt has nothing to do with content creation, has nothing to do with social media, it has nothing to do with YouTube or making videos or short form or long form content or copywriting frameworks or any of that stuff. What I want you to understand is that by using certain models and understanding the cost structure behind them, and by understanding and having clarity in your own mind about how to converse with these models, even with general prompts for significantly smaller models, we can get outcomes that are really performant. And so I came in here and you can see I actually tinkered with the temperature and the top P and some of the others, but these aren't my personal settings. These are essentially straight from the previous page with a little bit of, I kind of moved it around a little bit, but I've not actually tested these parameters in advance of this video. So I started out the conversation with basically saying, like, my end goal of this conversation is an outline so I can make a YouTube video. And so the other really cool thing about OpenRouter is you can test models side by side. So if I were to hide these two things, we can see how the conversation went with me back and forth just with Haiku. But then if I turn that off and turn on Wizard, we could see how the conversation went just with the larger Wizard model. But the cool thing about OpenRouter is we can actually query them and read them back and forth in real time. Now, obviously, this does create some challenges if each model goes in a very different direction, but fortunately, it was fairly similar, and I'll show you that today. So first, I came in and Haiku basically just gave me a general structure of how it feels the videos should go. So it talked about, hey, first talk about popular LLMs, talk about practical applications, show a hands-on demonstration, all that stuff. Okay. Now, we're in the video, so we know this isn't how the video actually ended up. But that's okay because it gave us a starting point. Because all I started with was this idea. I just want to make an educational, informative YouTube video on how to use the latest LLM tools. So while this wasn't exactly what I had in mind, it was a starting point. And so let's see what the larger Wizard model created. It created a totally different format. And it was like, first do an introduction, then talk about LLMs, then what they're capable of. So once again, it kind of took it in a different direction, but it gave me a starting point. And then lastly, what was really interesting is the 7B model actually gave me the outline of a script. Do the introduction. What's the background information? How to get started? What are the core functionalities? What are the deep dives into the features, right? This actually more closely followed what I had in mind. So from all of this, I now need to understand where I want to point those models to go. And what I wanted to do was give the model my perspective on how this video should go. So I basically said, I want to show people how to utilize lesser known, less expensive, but seriously powerful LLMs. Then I asked, how should we introduce this topic? And so Haiku came up with this nice format, and it came up with the title of Unleash the Power of Underrated LLM Tools. Now, once again, there's no copywriting prompt. I didn't say, utilize this persuasive framework. It came in my opinion, with a pretty strong title for potentially my video that I might end up using. So it came in and started generating a structure. Let's see how the larger Wizard model did. So one thing I have noticed about this Wizard model is it's got nice formatting up here, but then down here, it kind of loses its formatting. So that is something to bear in mind. If you're building agentic workflows with some of these Wizard models, you really have to be careful with kind of your formatting on the back end, because sometimes it can get a little bit messed up. But anyways, the Wizard model comes in and, excuse me, actually I was in the wrong spot, but it did the same thing. The Wizard model came in and it actually wrote a screenplay. So this is really cool because I didn't even have the idea of a screenplay in mind. I just wanted an outline because I'm more of a writing person than a video person. So it came in with the screenplay, but that gave me the idea to ask it about the qualities of a good YouTube video. So then in the follow-up, I could take the structure of the qualities of a good YouTube video and ask it to write me a screenplay. And then I started giving it more and more information. And so if we go into Haiku, it starts writing this screenplay and describing, and you can start seeing in your head what this video might actually look like, and does it match what you think the video should look like in your own mind. And that's one of the really important things about working with LLMs is you need to have an idea and a vision in your own mind and bring that to the table first before actually interacting with the LLM, because it's going to guide you in certain places and you need to know, hey, do I want to go in that direction or do I actually want to go in a different direction? And so once again, the title's good, but the actual content of the introduction is not where I'm going to take it. But that doesn't matter because I know what I'm going to say here. right? So it's just giving me more of a structure and filling it with placeholder content, but giving me more and more of this structure that helps me go from idea to execution in something much closer to 1 to 3 hours in comparison to spending hours planning. What am I going to write about? Then having to put that into a structure, then having to edit that structure and thinking, how is it going to be persuasive? That's something that these models do incredibly well, is even though I didn't ask for it to be put into a persuasive structure, it's just naturally going to do that because that's what it's been trained on, right? And then so finally at the bottom, it ends up generating, and I think the 7B did a pretty decent version. It ends up generating, and once again, this is a 7B model. This is 7 cents per million input and output tokens. And it's coming up with, copywriting like this, with, essentially time stamping how long each section should take. And while, it didn't get the models right because I didn't tell it what models I was going to utilize, I can come in and edit this very quickly, and we can see that this content is actually how people want to learn. If I'm comparing 3 models, give the background information, introduce each model, compare the pricing, show speed and performance, show real world examples, and then give practical takeaways. This is a really high quality, starting point on how to create a good video on the topic. And all I did was I used the right models in a cost effective way in a conversation. It probably took me 5 or 10 minutes to have this conversation back and forth with the LLMs. And in 5 minutes, I'm going with essentially the starting point of a screenplay that I can go in and edit. I can continue editing this, in line, chatting back and forth with the models. And so I wanted to show you this just to reinforce the point that you don't need to be incredible at prompt engineering. You don't need to be, incredible at really understanding the underlying structure of the output content that you're trying to do. What it allows you to do, and what LLMs allow you to do, is go from idea to execution much faster. And that's something that's super powerful because it will give you outlines, it will give you templates, it will give you structures, it will give you ideas. And if you really internalize that and come to the LLM with clarity of a vision, you can take that output content, tweak it, and get really good production and production value in significantly less time. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you're testing the Haiku Wizard or Wizard 7B models and what parameters and what prompts you're using, because I'd love to see that, or maybe even do a video on some of the settings that you're using. And thanks so much for stopping by.